So, Matt, tell me about the Grasmere Energy Policy Forum. It was there today where you were talking again about the on-the-ground implications of what is supposedly the only way to go.
It was great to join Angus Taylor here in central Queensland at the Grasmere Sale Yards. Some of the best sale yards in the world, really. We weren't there talking cattle, though, just talking this major issue that's hit central Queensland in recent years, which is just wind and solar and battery projects earmarked everywhere, disrupting people's lives. We had 400 people turn up tonight. Heard some harrowing personal stories from people like Cedric and Therese Creed, who've had their farming communities split into two from a massive solar project. We had someone, Fiona, drive 7 hours to come along to the forum tonight, hosted by Carl Stefanovic. She drove 7 hours to tell her story about wind dividing her community at Jendowie, a beautiful community in the Darling Downs. It's just a story repeated everywhere. We just need to get this message out to more and more Australians that this current approach on energy policy is not working. It's not working for them because your power prices are going through the roof. It's not working for our economy because we're losing industry hand over fist. And it's killing and crushing the hopes and dreams of rural communities too. So none of it's really working, and yet this government just has its head in the sand. It's saying, let's just continue on a failed energy policy process. We need to change, and that's why Angus and I were there tonight saying we're going to scrap net zero, going to get rid of these ridiculous subsidies going to some of the largest companies in the world, often international companies for a start, and let's focus again on using our own resources, use all our coal, our oil, our gas, our renewables where it's appropriate to do so, but not everywhere, and do that to lower power prices for all Australians.
Nick, can we have a different version of this debate, which is I want to talk about implementation, all right? I know where you're coming from. I know where Matt's coming from. I also know when we were in Armidale last night, there's a bloke who's looking me in the eye. He's got glassy eyes and he's talking about significant land value changes that have happened on a multi-generational farm that he's got because of this stuff that's happening around, right? Real money, real consequences, right? Obviously, you're an advocate for let's keep ramping it up. But how the hell do we implement this differently that we don't get a scenario? We're not 400 weirdos, 400 citizens turn up on a Monday because what is happening to where they live is a disgrace.
Imagine this. A farmer in central Queensland stares out at his paddock, except it is not his paddock anymore. It is a sea of solar panels. And the company that built it, long gone. Check cashed, clipboard packed. That, mates, is the story of Australia's energy transition. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on it. Quick favor, if you're loving this breakdown, let me see you hit that subscribe button right now. Over 90% of viewers have not yet. It's free, takes a second, and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now, let us get back to it.
Yeah, I don't doubt for a second that the stories Matt is telling about people who turned up and the challenges they're facing is absolutely real. And I know you were there at sale yards for this event, Matt, but I hope you weren't giving people hogwash on this topic. I hope you were telling the truth to people. And the truth is we can't go back to the coal age. We need to keep moving forward. That doesn't mean there aren't significant challenges here. And yes, when it comes to people who are having their property values or what they can get out of their property affected in some way, they need to be properly compensated. In fact, more than compensated, they need to do well out of the disruption that they're facing. But we can't go backwards. We need to keep going forward. And what we're seeing in Australia, particularly around solar and the installation of rooftop solar, is absolutely remarkable, Paul. We've got the highest level of rooftop solar of any country in the world. It's close to 40% of Australian households.
Sure, and I don't
and that is
hate
fantastic.
that.
That's what we're talking about.
I don't hate that. Matt doesn't hate that. But what I do hate is that people who turned up, again, they've driven 7 hours to tell their story. But again, another thing here too, Matt, again, trying to have a different version of this conversation, is I was thinking about it when I was there in Armidale last night. Again, thank you to everyone who came along. It was an awesome night at the Welders Dog. It was a fantastic joint. Great venue, by the way, lovely people. was trying to work out, and one of the frustrations they have is that when they try to communicate with these companies, they just get nothing, right? There's this sort of, somebody rolls through with a clipboard once and then sort of doesn't communicate any further. It doesn't feel like the industry has a central place or some sort of place where you can take your grievance about the transition, if it is definitely rolling through a particular area, about how you don't go backwards so they can go forwards. How much is that part of the problem too? Is that, for want of a better term, that now big wind, big solar doesn't care and doesn't actually talk to these people?
So here is the setup. Nationals leader Matt Canavan sat down recently with Melbourne's Lord Mayor Nicholas Ree, and honestly it was less a debate and more a tug of war over who gets to hold the steering wheel on this country's energy future. Canavan's argument is simple and it stings. Power prices are up, industries are packing their bags, and rural communities are being split right down the middle by projects nobody asked for. And here is where it gets juicy. Canavan tells this story about a community energy forum out west where a farming couple described their neighbourhood being torn apart by a massive solar development, and a woman who drove 7 hours just to say her community was being divided by a wind farm. 7 hours, mates. That is not activism, that is desperation dressed up as a road trip.
Look, it's a huge part of the problem, but it's not the only problem. Quite often the companies involved, and as I said, they're often international investors involved here, are not here for the long term. They seek to try and get a project up and running, possibly, if they're lucky, get some cool, hard taxpayer cash to back them, and they flip it. They flip the project once that's all done to a large energy company, a company connected to maybe a big industrial facility that wants to spruik its green credentials, and they walk away. And you don't have that long-term commitment. The other problem here is that the projects themselves don't really deliver any benefits locally anyway. Most other large projects, mining projects, manufacturing projects, deliver long-term jobs. These projects don't do that, not in any serious way. There's a handful of jobs left over after construction. During construction, most of the workers come from out of town anyway and live in camps. And so there's just not that local buy-in. And that's a major problem, but coming back to the broader problem here is, Nick said, look, we've got all this renewables on our roofs, and that's fine, that's great, but they're not working right now, Nick. It's night time. We've got too much of that stuff. We need a balance. We need a balance in our energy system. We don't have that balance under this government's energy policy. That's why you're paying through the roof for power prices. It's why we're losing our industrial competitiveness, and it's why we should get back to just being balanced. I'm not against all renewables. Sure, on people's roofs, fine. There's some other areas where we can have renewables, but we can't rely on it solely. And you can see that right around the world. Everywhere it's tried, it has failed. It's failing here as well. Let's get back to common sense and balance.
Well, I think it's WA. I'll correct it tomorrow if I double check, but they're doubling down on a brand new gas as the firming technology. So again, that's a Labor government. So we'll see. Plenty more on that, and we could spend all night, but there's a couple of things I want to get to.
Now, before you think this is just another coal versus solar slugfest, hold that thought, because it is not. Canavan's real gripe is process. Developers roll in, do what he calls a, quote, clipboard consultation, unquote, grab the subsidy, flip the project, and vanish faster than your mate at the pub when the bill arrives. Compare that to mining or manufacturing, which actually stick around and employ your neighbours for decades. That is the contrast he is drawing, and fair dinkum, it lands. But hang on, do not switch off the fossil fuel express just yet, because Nicholas Ree brings the other side of the ledger, and it's not some greeny fantasy either. Ree agrees the consultation has been woeful, and landowners deserve to be, in his words, more than compensated. But he points out something rather inconvenient for the doom and gloom crowd. Rooftop solar is sitting on roughly 40% of Australian households already, quietly succeeding while everyone argues about the big stuff. His point? We cannot rewind the clock to the coal age. We just need to stop bungling the rollout. So, is it renewables versus fossil fuels? Nope, wrong question entirely. The real fight is about who decides, how fast, and who actually benefits. top-down efficiency from Canberra or bottom-up trust from the community. That, mates, is the actual battlefield, and it explains a heck of a lot about why regional Australia feels dudded while capital cities feel confident.
A little story that was around towards the end of last week and I thought was going to build, which is why I didn't touch it a couple of days ago, and I thought it was going to build over the weekend. It didn't. It sort of came and went quickly, but its consequences matter. Of course, Fair Work Australia is the organisation that's there to settle significant industrial disputes, okay? Created by the Labor Party, and of course, as it is created by the Labor Party, it is staffed heavily by people who are on the union side of the equation. Yes, when the governments change, there's an ability to change the makeup, but they want to create a new thing called the Fair Work Court, where again, somebody would be able to adjudicate on other disputes that exist, including pay disputes, between workers and employers. Now, Nicholas, I'm always going to be on the side of the worker. I also don't want the boss to get flushed down the toilet. But when you put a new body together, is it not behoven on the government to say that because currently 0 positions, there's going to be 100% of positions that will be chosen by the political arm of the union movement, meaning that this is not a fair and equal umpire. It just ends up being a club for one side of the industrial dispute of Australia?
Well, I certainly don't hope that happen. Well, I certainly don't want to see that happen. I've actually got a lot of hope for this new body. And look, I say that as someone, I started my career as a lawyer. I used to work as an industrial relations lawyer, representing people in underpayment claims, unfair dismissal claims, all sorts of industrial type disputation. And we used to have an industrial relations court in Australia, and then the Howard government moved that in, abolished it and moved it into the federal court. And I've got to say the federal court is more costly, more litigious than the old body used to be. So basically we're just bringing back what was once known as the Industrial Relations Court of Australia. It's now going to be called the Fair Work Court. And if it's done right, and I emphasise if it's done right, I think it could be a win-win for employers and employees. Why? Because it'll cut red tape, cut costs, get decisions made more quickly. It won't be too legalistic, be sort of common sense focused, and that's good for employers and it's good for employees as well.
And look, and again, on all of that stuff, no one's going to disagree. But Matt, when the legislation gets presented, right, is there an opportunity for the opposition? Because we know what the wedge is here, right? If you vote against it because you know they're going to stack 100% of it, right? Oh, they're voting on the sides of it. They hate work. You know, all of that rubbish, right? But is there the possibility when the legislation is presented to try to find some sort of a fix to the system to say that there has to be some level of balance about its makeup for the first 2 years when it is being built from the ground up? Otherwise, it's just a Labor stack fest, isn't it?
Look, I'm sure we'll seek to do things like that, Paul. Seek to have a proper Senate inquiry, I'm sure, and put forward some sensible amendments. The problem we've got at the moment is the Senate is a bit of a rubber stamp because the Labor Party is in effectively a coalition with the Greens. They worked on that coalition last time we met to massively jack up taxes, and they're likely here to add massive amounts of union-backed red tape. Look, I hear what Nick said, and there's a little bit of common sense to it, but I don't know. There just didn't seem to be anybody out there calling for this. It's come out of the blue. It's sounds like a bit the Prime Minister didn't have an announcement, so he announced this. But, where was the issue here? We've got a lot of other issues in our country right now, and I think the government should instead be focusing on fixing up the migration numbers and system, which is out of control, fixing up those energy issues that I mentioned earlier, dealing with the cost of living, which is connected to those energy policy issues. I don't know. This seems like announcing something for the sake of announcing something. It's not necessarily really targeted at the major issues facing Australians.
All right, last one here, and make it quick for me because I've got to get to the UK in a moment because, as always, lots of news happening there. But, Nick, how can I just let this occasion pass? One of the great tourist attractions is returning after a long break. The Melbourne Star up and running, the giant Ferris wheel. People can get in there. Will you be the one pressing go? Do you cut a ribbon? What happens on Thursday?
Look, I just might be, Paul. This is a really big deal for
ding, ding.
Melbourne, a really big deal. Of course, it closed during COVID, so it's been shut for 5 years. And actually, when I first ran for Lord Mayor, I said I was going to get the wheel turning again, and plenty of people poo-pooed me and said it would never happen. Well, guess what? Next week, the wheel is going to start it's going to light up the wheel ahead of it turning again, and it's a great day for Melbourne and the symbolism of having that wheel spinning again. It's pretty important for our city.
And just when you think the conversation could not zigzag any further, enter stage left the Fair Work Court proposal, a new industrial tribunal that has Canavan raising an eyebrow so high it left orbit, warning it could tilt toward one side of the room. Ree, ever the diplomat, reckons it could work if it is fast, fair and sensible. Two very different temperatures on the same kettle. Then, almost as a palate cleanser, the conversation drifts to something delightfully wholesome, the reopening of the Melbourne Star Ferris wheel after years shut down. Sounds random, but stick with me, because it is basically the whole episode in miniature. A big piece of infrastructure, once stalled, now spinning again, giving people a reason to look up and reconnect. Symbolism much? At the end of the day, this is not simply about panels, turbines or coal seams. It is about whether Australians feel like partners in this transition or bystanders watching decisions get made somewhere else entirely. Thanks so much for watching. Australian Signal appreciates every one of you. And please don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below.